So this is going to be one of those videos that I've actually been thinking about making for a little while now. It's in Monday, so I figure, hey, good a day as any to actually finally get this one posted. So what I want to go over here is my predictions for Bethesda's E3 conference. The E3 conference is now 20 days away. It is on June 10th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. For those of you who actually are going to this, the invites did largely go out. I got my own invite. I'm not going to be going to it, so maybe I'll free up an invite for one of you, but I will be going to the larger E3 as a whole, so you can see content from that if you want to subscribe after this video. So I actually made an original prediction video in March, and I actually made it at a really funny time because in the following weeks of that video, almost all of my predictions for what was going to be announced at E3 that year got announced. So I actually combed through that video and looked at everything I predicted. I'm going to post a little document on screen right now. This is just cutting out the Bethesda Game Studio stuff because of course they have not confirmed anything, and as you can see, a lot of the things were confirmed. I think like 2 or 3 of these things were actually confirmed within 7 days of me posting that video. And believe it or not, this is actually really good news for all of us as Bethesda fans. It should hopefully mean that Bethesda's conference is going to contain way less of those minor DLC announcements. As you see, a bunch of those actually did end up getting confirmed. And although I'm sure some of them will actually get a bit of a shout out at E3, it's not going to have as much time dedicated to it as it would if it was the initial reveal. In addition, before we really jump into this one, I do want to make a distinction. There is Bethesda Softworks as well as Bethesda Game Studios. Those are 2 different companies. When we refer to Bethesda's E3 conference, we're talking about Bethesda Softworks E3 conference. Bethesda Softworks is a publisher. They publish games from many different companies, including ZeniMax Online Studios, id Software, Arcane Studios, Machine Games, Tango Gameworks, and of course Bethesda Game Studios themselves. On the other hand, Bethesda Game Studios is a developer, and they actually make games like the Fallout and Elder Scrolls franchise. We're going to start things off talking largely about Bethesda Softworks, but towards the end of this video, we'll get into the more exciting things like a new AAA game from Bethesda Game Studios, that being your Starfield, Fallout 5, or even the Elder Scrolls 6. So jumping right into my revised predictions, we're going to of course start off with the DLC again. Something Bethesda typically does with this is actually announce a game at one year's E3, and then the following year actually announce some new DLC for that. That was kind of the basis for a lot of my predictions in that original video, and of course almost all of those did end up getting confirmed. So to knock out the low-hanging fruit, we actually know that Prey is getting a Moon DLC. Bethesda has been teasing this increasingly over the past few months, and it pretty much is definitive at this point that we are seeing it at this E3, and we're going to get a full reveal of it. We know it's going to be Moon-based, based off some of their teases, but we don't actually know anything outside of that. And in addition, I actually speculate that it's going to be a fairly large DLC. This for 2 reasons. Firstly, if we reference back to my original list, all those other things that got announced were also DLC, but on the more minor side. If Prey's Moon DLC is just going to be something fairly minor, you would kind of expect it to be announced already. From this, we could kind of assume that it's going to be something larger and hopefully have a lot more hours in it. In addition, just the fact that they have been teasing this for so long, they're trying to pull people into the conference to actually watch this, and if they're going to dedicate some of this now very valuable conference time to this DLC, it does follow that it should be something pretty cool. So I'll just bundle these 2 together, but we actually have the Elder Scrolls Legends card pack as well as the Elder Scrolls Online expansion. So as you saw before, I actually predicted both of these in my original video, and we ended up getting new announcements for both of those things shortly after that video was posted. They revealed the Houses of Morrowind card pack for the Elder Scrolls Legends, as well as we actually got the Somerset expansion for Elder Scrolls Online. With that being said though, since these announcements were made so long ago and actually so soon after that video, I think it could be kind of likely that we actually get an additional announcement in these 2 categories. I'd say for the Elder Scrolls Legends, it's actually way more likely. Card games are such a fad nowadays, and although that fad seems to be dying down, I definitely think we'll see something, whether it be a new card pack or even some kind of larger expansion for that game at the E3. For ESO, I would definitely say it's less likely, but I think it's pretty plausible that they're working on something and it may be revealed at this E3 also. And then we get into the VR titles. I predicted Skyrim VR, and that actually got confirmed and then subsequently released following that video. So we're probably going to hear nothing about that at this E3. What I think we might see is similar to what they did with Doom. They announced and released Doom in 2016, and then of course in 2017's E3 we actually got Doom VFR, or the VR variant of Doom. For this year's E3, maybe The Evil Within or Wolfenstein will actually get a VR variant. Wolfenstein in particular, I think would be really well suited for a VR port, and I think a lot of people would really like that. Bethesda seems to be investing fairly heavily in the VR world, and a lot of the best VR games are actually Bethesda games. I'm putting Prey on a way lower likelihood because we are seeing additional DLC and hopefully a large DLC announcement for that. I just can't imagine they're going to announce this big expansion and also talk about a VR port. Another one that I put at possible but fairly unlikely is actually going to be the PSVR version of Fallout 4. Obviously Fallout VR was a pretty big hit, a lot of people really enjoyed it. It follows that it would be fairly easy to actually port that to PSVR and they'd make some money in the process, so I think it could happen, but again, I think it's fairly unlikely. I think largely the reason we saw Skyrim on PSVR is because Sony paid for some exclusivity for that first year. Sony's probably not going to be shelling out all that much money to actually get Fallout 4 VR now, considering how old it actually is. Then we get into the Switch ports, and this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. I think Fallout 4 getting ported over to the Switch is still plausible. That was my original prediction. We actually saw what looked like a leak from a long time ago. In addition to VR, Bethesda has been investing themselves pretty heavily into the Switch market. I personally know of a lot of people that actually bought a Nintendo Switch just to play Skyrim on it. In addition to that, the Nintendo Switch is simply the highest selling console ever, so it makes quite a bit of sense to actually port your game over to it and reach that very wide market. In addition to Fallout 4 on the Switch, I think again we may actually see either Wolfenstein 2 or maybe The Evil Within or maybe even Prey also get ported over to the Switch. The most interesting Switch port though would definitely be Fallout 3 Anniversary Edition. This is something that was quote unquote leaked. Whether or not you believe that leak or the validity of that leak is up in the air. This image was posted recently. I'll actually have a link to it at the end of this video if you want to see my full coverage on it. Of course, being an internal Nintendo document pertaining to E3 and listing Fallout 3 Anniversary as getting ported over to the Switch in addition to Wolfenstein 2. For me at least, this actually raised a fairly interesting concept. So this year is Fallout 3's 10-year anniversary. It was a big game for Bethesda and Bethesda Game Studios specifically. I know for me at least, it's actually the first game I played by them and what made me such a mega fan of their series. Obviously Skyrim and Fallout New Vegas and of course then Fallout 4 were even bigger games, but Fallout 3 still holds a pretty special place in my heart, and I imagine the same is going to follow suit for Bethesda themselves. I can't imagine for Fallout 3's 10-year anniversary they're going to do nothing, but at the same time I can't imagine we're actually going to get a complete remake of it, actually porting it over to the new engine. I think we'll get more of what I'm calling a soft remake. So what do I mean by soft remake? Well, obviously stability improvements. I have Fallout 3 with some mods on my PC and it crashes all the time. Fixing some of those existing bugs, actually making it 64-bit and maybe updating some of the textures would all be pretty cool things to do. But there are some more fundamental problems in that game. There of course is no real aiming system. There's not even iron sights or scopes in that game, which by today's standards is kind of crappy. And again, the work to actually change that is considerably greater than just updating some of the textures and making it 64-bit. So what I think we might see is a Switch port for Fallout 3's anniversary, something that isn't up to the same standards as some of these other AAA games, but being able to experience this old game that you love so much, getting that nostalgia effect, and having it all be portable as the major selling point, I think seems pretty plausible. I'm going to say that's what's most likely to get revealed at this E3. What I think is also possible but less likely is actually getting ported over to the new generation of systems. So maybe all those same things I just listed, 64-bit, some higher upgraded textures, but also mod support on PS4 as well as Xbox One. Let's say they slap a $30 price tag on it, I think a lot of people would buy that game. I think this is less likely though because it's not as easy a sell and there definitely won't be as many mods for Fallout 3 Anniversary when compared to something like Fallout 4 or Skyrim. Skyrim especially, with the release of Skyrim Special Edition, a lot of people just ported over their mods. Skyrim is on this newer engine, the same engine as Fallout 4, and the modding community was still active and thriving. Fallout 3's modding community is largely dead, and many of those mods haven't been touched in literally over 5 years. The release in New Vegas made many people jump ship from Fallout 3 and just never look back. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen with this. Again, I think it's pretty likely that we'll see it on the Nintendo Switch with that portability selling point. But whether or not we actually see an updated version on consoles with mod support or not is up in the air for me. I also think it's immensely unlikely, although I would personally love it, to see a full remake in the new engine. That would be an awesome game. I would spend $60 on that game, but at the same time, it's going to take a lot more work and the profit margins just simply aren't there compared to some of these other options. And as one final note for Fallout 3 Anniversary Edition, there actually is going to be an interesting release window. Fallout 3 came out in early October. Obviously, a lot of modern Bethesda games actually come out in November. So maybe they release Fallout 3 Anniversary on their 10-year anniversary for that game, and then you have a full month before the new AAA RPG from Bethesda Game Studios comes out. That's kind of nice, and I definitely could see that happening. But what I also think is possible, and way less exciting, is actually some new Creation Club content. I think in general, we're going to see new Creation Club content at the C3, maybe if there's only a short section dedicated to it, but a fairly large release, like one of these larger packs. But I'm thinking maybe they don't actually do Fallout 3 Anniversary. Maybe that's just not happening. What we could see is a Creation Club pack for Fallout 3 in Fallout 4. Maybe bringing a few short quests, a bunch of different items for $5 to $10. I know a lot of people would dislike this, and I imagine Bethesda would realize how much hate they'd get for that. It's almost like you're selling nostalgia at that point, and it'd be very public if they show it at E3. But again, I definitely think that is on the table and something that is important to take into consideration. Alright, so now finally onto the more exciting part of this video, AAA games. First, we'll start with Bethesda Softworks AAA games, and we'll end it off with a Bethesda Game Studio AAA game. So of course, we do know about Rage 2 coming out from Bethesda Softworks. The confirmed release date for that one's actually going to be spring of 2019 though. I believe in a tweet somewhere, Pete Hines actually confirmed we're going to see more of Rage 2 at this E3. So you'll get a new trailer, some actual just normal gameplay, someone playing the game, not the kind of montage style that we actually saw in the gameplay trailer. And Rage 2 is going to be worked on by id Software and Avalanche Studios. Avalanche Studios being the people behind the Just Cause games as well as the recent Mad Max game. So this part's actually important. Who is making this game? Although it's not really confirmed anywhere, I personally think that Avalanche was the major player behind Rage 2. They had a hunting game come out in 2017, but they also have two studios, that being one in New York and one in Stockholm. It seems like they have a lot of manpower to actually just build this game by themselves. Having two full studios, that being id Software and Avalanche, dedicating all of their members to this game seems really unlikely to me. So what I think happened is Avalanche is actually the main developer behind Rage 2, and id Software, the people behind Rage 1, and of course Doom most recently, we're actually working on this somewhat to implement the shooting systems, but also working on another game. With all that being said, I don't think we're going to see anything new from id Software at this E3. I think maybe next year or the year after that, we'll see a Doom 2. Doom sold really well, and I think it's a successful reboot of that franchise, so I imagine they're going to want to keep producing games in that franchise. So as for Bethesda Softworks' other people, again, they all seem pretty busy. ZeniMax Online is working on the Elder Scrolls Online, and I assume a new expansion. Maybe we'll see that, but I doubt we're going to see like a Fallout Online or anything like that. Machine Games just released Wolfenstein 2 last year, so I don't think we'll see anything from them. And Tango Gameworks also just released The Evil Within 2 last year, so I don't think we're going to see anything with them. And then of course Arcane Studios is working on this Prey DLC, so I think that will be their announcement and nothing else. So with Rage 2, Bethesda Softworks is working with Avalanche. That's not somebody they typically work with, it's not something that ZeniMax owns, so maybe there also is going to be another one of these third-party companies that we're not typically used to seeing Bethesda Softworks work with announce a new game at their E3, or get kind of contracted by Bethesda Softworks to make a new game. Again, that's totally possible, but I think that's unlikely. I think the main game of this year is going to be whatever Bethesda Game Studios' new game is. And in fact, the only two AAA games we see this year are going to be Rage 2 and Bethesda Game Studios' new game. So what is that BGS game going to be? Obviously, a lot of people do think it's Starfield. There was a trademark filed for that a while ago, and just ever since then, the speculation and rumors pertaining to that game have been flying. It definitely is possible, but I think the main takeaway here is that Bethesda Game Studios is going to announce a new game at this E3, or at least that's my prediction. There's been a ton of evidence to support this. Todd Howard has had interviews talking about how he's wrapping up a new game or making an analogy to wrapping up a new game.
Or I have to remind myself, it's like you forget.
Yeah.
You know, if you move, you haven't moved in a while. Moving is terrible. Packing and moving or having a child, not terrible, but the pressures of it and the, you know, that those are, you forget how hard it is to finish a game.
Pete Hines has said on Twitter this is going to be one of their longest E3 conferences ever, and also made claims such as there's going to be something for everyone. Bethesda Game Studios' Twitter account has been largely quiet, which is exactly what happened leading up to Fallout 4, and then in turn people are using that Starfield trademark to largely think it is going to be a Starfield game, but I think that's more open-ended and there are other possibilities. One thing I definitely do think is going to happen though is we actually get the announcement of a new Bethesda Game Studios game. So let's just say it's Starfield, and in addition, we're going to get the release of a new Bethesda Game Studios mobile game. This is what they did with Fallout 4. They announced Fallout 4 and then at the same time released and announced Fallout Shelter. In that same interview, Todd Howard actually said they're pretty much always going to be working on a mobile game going forward.
And I think we'll always have a mobile game in development, just like we do on the larger AAA console PC side where we're overlapping stuff. We're doing that on mobile now.
So I definitely we're going to see the tandem announce and release of this mobile game. In addition to that, I actually think a new Fallout could be on the radar also, although definitely unlikely for this E3. I think more likely than a lot of other people. Many people say there's like 0% chance that there is a new Fallout coming anytime soon, but I think it's a little bit more likely than that. I made a full video on it and there's just way too much to actually talk about in this shorter video, so I will have this linked at the end of this one also. The Twitch going to wrap it up for this video. It was definitely a longer one, but I wanted to go fairly in depth, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. So for today's psych fun fact, I actually want to talk about something that I believe I actually mentioned in a live stream a while ago, but either way, it's more or less a misconception. I want to make a clarification on this. So a lot of people talk about positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and I feel like most people don't actually understand what that means. So positive reinforcement, we could actually break that down, means to add reinforcement. So to take an action or add an action that is actually going to result in that behavior being more common, or your goal is for that behavior to be more common. So an example of this would be, let's say your pet does what you told it to and then you give it a treat. This is different than negative reinforcement. A lot of people say negative reinforcement as if you're trying to decrease a behavior, but it also is an attempt to increase that behavior. So negative reinforcement would be like, let's say your pet does exactly what you want it to, so you take off its annoying collar. You're removing something in order to increase a behavior. This is different than negative punishment, which you remove something in order to actually decrease a behavior. It's like, let's say your kid's being really annoying and you want him to do that less, so you take away his phone. That would be negative punishment. It's just something you probably heard about in like media, or just people talk about this kind of stuff all the time, but a lot of the time I find people actually get it wrong. Either way, that's going to wrap it up for this video. It's ending up being a pretty long one, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, again, I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you guys all next time. Later.